Let us discuss Gita today. Okay. So in the 4th chapter, Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya, on that shloka, and after that there were 3 or 4 shlokas at a stretch we discussed. So Jnana Mahima, how one thing, I'll just repeat this, the summarize those 4 shlokas. This Jnana can be from the 34th. This Jnana can be obtained from Guru. First thing is, Jnanam is awakening. Awakening takes place when somebody wakes us up. So this is the peculiarity about the very nature of Jnanam and Ajnanam. A person himself is a part of Ajnanam. Because the problem is not that Jiva is suffering from Ajnanam. Jivatvam itself is Ajnanam. That is the biggest problem. See, in the worldly ignorances, I have ignorance about something. I am ignorant of something. So, some other object, external object. Regarding that, if I have ignorance, but the person is me who is ignorant of it, you can try various methods with your sense organs, mind, and different ways. You can try to find out. So you can correct your misunderstanding about the external world. That is easy. Easy means with your available means you could get it. But here it's totally different. Here the very subject individual, the individual subject itself is due to ignorance. That is the problem. The very individual who is trying to know, who is working hard, who is going around, himself is a product of ignorance. The very Jivatvam is a product of ignorance. Therefore, the very person or an individual himself being a part of ignorance, himself being a product of ignorance, he doesn't know how to get rid of himself and come to his inner core reality. So, this is the difficulty. Therefore, the Jiva himself and all the means he has with himself fail to help him because whatever I do, the I remains. See, whatever I do, the very doership remains, the agent of action. Whatever I do, as an individual I do. But the very individuality itself is Jiva or Samsara. I cannot get rid of. More I do, more I continue to exist as an individual. So this individuality has to be melted away, has to be corrected by a vision, an understanding, which is not springing from individuality, but which is something different from individuality, but it melts away, it swallows the individuality. So my consciousness has to be turned in such a way where the individuality himself is not the center of it. Okay? I have a consciousness in a worldly sense I am talking. Consciousness means mind. Worldly sense I am talking. The worldly consciousness, that is the mind. So the individuality is a part of mind. He is using the mind and is a part of the mind. The individual is using the mind and is a part of the mind. All his knowledges, all his experiences are through the mind. So therefore, he has to be helped to, he means his consciousness. His consciousness means mind. His entire mind, which involves a subject-object relationship, has to be dissolved. And that mind, attention of the mind should be focused elsewhere. Elsewhere means what? There where this subject-object duality doesn't exist. So this he can't do himself, because he is an individual subject facing the object, subject facing the object. Whenever, as an individual, he can only see the object by excluding the subject. And whenever he looks at, whenever he sees the object, he stands as a subject and looks at the object. So this divisiveness of subject-object, he has no way of overcoming it. He remains a subject, gets related to the object. Subject-object, this duality, this relativeness, this duality, this dichotomy, this relativeness, standing a subject, I relate to the object. Okay? So while watching the object, knowing the object, I stand as a subject. So this is inevitable process of subject-object duality. You stand as a subject by relating to object. By knowing the object, you stand as a subject, because this relationship exists only when there is a dichotomy of subject to object. And this, my operation, my thinking, my understanding, my living as an individual, as a thinking, understanding, living, all my worldly processes, all my worldly life occurs, takes place within this dichotomy alone, subject-object dichotomy. I am an individual facing the world, interacting with the world, knowing the world. So this dichotomy is instinctive in us, and remaining in this instinctive dichotomy, we continue our life. All our life activities, experiences, knowledges, everything is based upon this dichotomy only. So as a subject, I relate to object. I have no other means to break this dichotomy. To breaking the dichotomy is a very strange thing. The strangeness is, I stand as a subject, relate to object. Trying to know the object, relate to object. I am, in fact, my very existence as a subject is relative to the object. So when I am living in this subject-object relativity, the transcending subject-object relativity means including both subject-object without dividing it. See, this is a very peculiar statement. You have to include the subject, you have to include the object, without dividing them into subject and object. It is a strange because generally subject stands as a subject by being related to object. Now, to drop this dichotomy, what should you do? Should you give up the object? If you give, there is no way of giving up the object, because object, if you set aside, you won't come to the first thing is you cannot set aside. Who is to set aside? Because it is the subject, the operation of the subject. So as long as I operate as a subject, object remains. As long as I operate, as long as I function as a subject, being divided from the object. See, to be related, I should be divided. I should divide myself from the object and then get related to object. So this divisiveness and relativeness both go together. Both are simultaneous or together. I divide myself from the object and then I get related to object. Object gets divided from the subject and it is related to subject-object duality is necessary for relationship. In this relationship, the duality becomes inevitable. You cannot get rid of. Subject-object duality is impossible, because as long as I function, as long as I operate as a subject-object duality. So as a subject, all my function means what? See, what do I do? What is my existence as an individual, as a jiva? As my existence as an individual, my functioning as an individual, what do they constitute? Tell me. My existing as an individual, my functioning as an individual means being in this duality, being related to object. Stand as a subject, get related to object. But in fact, they are not two processes. They are not two steps. Standing as an object itself means being related to object. They are not two steps. Note it. Note this, underline this is important. It's not that first you stand as an object, then the next step you get related to object. Sorry, you stand as a subject and then get related to object. They are not two steps. They are not happening in sequence, one after the other. Okay? They are just one. They are simultaneous. Or in other words, they are just one. That means standing as a subject means being related to object. Being related to object means standing as a subject. They are just two ways of telling the same thing. I stand as a subject, get related to object. So they are both are one. So in this, all my life activities, however great, however good, however deep, however religious, spiritual, all normal activities of life involve this duality. Remaining within this dichotomy, I function. By functioning, I continue in the duality. Remaining in duality, I function. By functioning, I continue to be in the duality. There is no way that I can come out of duality. This is the peculiar thing, strange thing I got caught. Therefore, my subjective functioning means being a subject being related to object. As a subject being related to object, this dichotomy alone is my life. All my functions, all my understandings, all my experiences occur within this duality. Then transcending the duality looks only impossibility, because there is no way. I have no means, I have no capacity. All that I do continues in duality. More I do, more I continue in duality. More I do, more I continue in duality. I have no other way. That's where Shastra says, Tadviddi pranipatena, go to Guru. Because Guru alone is the right one to help you to understand, help you to come out of this duality. So your consciousness is a divisive consciousness. Subject, object, divisive, relating. Relating means divisiveness, divisiveness means relatedness. Now you need a non-divisive consciousness, non-relative consciousness. So therefore, your consciousness, which is continuously paying attention to object and paying attention to subject. Okay, paying attention to object, paying attention to subject means what? Dividing. A part of it is paying attention to object, paying attention to subject. Okay, this is what is a divisive consciousness. This divisive consciousness has to be melted away. That means division melted away, not consciousness. Consciousness can't be melted away, the divisiveness. So therefore, the only thing you can do is, only thing the Shastra or Guru do is, they turn your attention. They turn your attention to the source of both. There is a source of both subject and object. Subject and object spring from the one source which is free from the division of subject and object. So the one source which is free from the division of subject and object, dichotomy of subject and object, there is one source. So the very consciousness has to turn its attention. Therefore, Guru or Shastra turn your attention towards the source of consciousness. Source means look at, there is consciousness. That consciousness is neither subject nor object. It is not a relative, but it is. It is natural, it is self-existing, it is spontaneous, but without any division. Okay? It doesn't divide, but it is conscious. Conscious of what? See, this very question implies divisiveness again. Generally, when we say I am conscious, conscious of what? Oh, this means division. Consciousness, you are conscious and also conscious of something. Okay, this is what divisiveness is. Here, what we need to understand is just consciousness without looking at what you are conscious of. The object of consciousness is also consciousness, subject is also consciousness, object is also consciousness. It is not one being conscious of other. It is just consciousness being consciousness. Okay? Consciousness being consciousness. Therefore, your whole field of your mind, your field of consciousness, that is your mind, the entire mind should cease to be divisive. Should cease to be divisive means what? Don't pay attention to the object. By paying attention to the object, you are dividing yourself from the object and standing as a subject. Okay? Instead of pay, because the very paying attention to object is divisiveness. Therefore, don't pay attention to object. That means your attention should not be in the object. Then, if you don't pay attention to the object, you don't need to be a subject. Okay? Then, when you don't pay attention to the object, you don't need to be the subject. Therefore, your need to be subject melts away when you don't pay attention to the object. The attention to the object melts away, your need to be subject also melts away, the divisiveness of subject to object melts away simultaneously. Therefore, pay attention to something. That's why we always say, look at the deep sleep. Deep sleep is not another entity. It is the same consciousness without the division of subject to object. Okay? Without the divisiveness of subject and object, without the dichotomy of subject and object, the same wakeful consciousness without the division is called deep sleep. Deep sleep is not another experience. If you say it is another experience, it is the mind imagining as an another. That means again dividing. Mind is dividing as this experience and another experience. See, the mind is dividing two experiences. Now I have one experience, there is another experience. Now one experience and another experience, this too is again divisiveness. Okay? Therefore, you don't look for another state. The way being in the present state, you are already in that conscious state. In this consciousness, your attention shouldn't be towards the object. Therefore, just to be the entire field of consciousness. Entire field of consciousness. So, you are not trying to be conscious. You are aware that consciousness is already there. See the difference here. When you are aware of, when you are trying to know, you are dividing. When you are trying to know, you are dividing. In fact, Vedantic listening, Vedantic Shravana, you have to be very careful. You might be listening to Vedanta more in a divisive way. You might be doing it. That defeats the very purpose of Vedanta. Okay? Vedantic teaching, the class, the purpose of teaching is not to divide. Probably people, the listener might think that, oh, I am trying to understand. Okay, this itself is a division. The knower and the known, the subject and the object, one who is trying to know and there is something to be known. Okay, there is nothing to be known. Vedantic listener doesn't try to know anything. Okay, if you are trying to know, you are maintaining the divisiveness of subject and object. Okay, if you are trying to know, you are maintaining the divisiveness of subject and object. Therefore, the very trying to know, looking elsewhere, still looking outside, waiting for something, waiting for the next, yet I am going to understand, and another one, next, this waiting for the next, looking into the next is divisiveness. Okay, this waiting for the next, looking into the next is divisiveness, because now and next, this is a division. Therefore, don't divide. That means there is consciousness. You don't see, I don't know how to use the word. Words fail to express certain things. Knowing, trying to know, the very trying to know is a function, is a thought. Okay, thought is dividing and thought is also self-perpetuating. Thought divides and it self-perpetuates. So what we do is, you don't try to know, you be awareful. Awareness is already there. What is already there, pay attention. You pay attention in such a way, there is two ways of attention. one attention is trying to know, another attention is you are already in the awareness. Be aware that you are already awareness. You are the awareness. Awareness is already there. You are not trying to know. In trying to know, you divide. So it is not a divisive awareness, it is existing awareness. Indivisible awareness, it is already awareful. You are already awareful. No attempt is required. No process is required. No trying is required. No thinking is required. It is already awareful. Whatever the thought is already part of awareness. Only cognize it is already part. See, you are only paying attention, you are only cognizing what is already. You are not trying to know yet a next one. If you are trying to know, then you are looking into next. This next divides you. So therefore, to avoid the division, you see that nothing is away from consciousness. It is already included in consciousness. See, be aware that there is a consciousness which includes everything. There is consciousness which already included. You are not trying to include. It is already included. It is already included. Subject is the same. Subject is included in consciousness. Object is included in consciousness. It is only consciousness. Everything included. Only be aware that is inclusive. All inclusive consciousness. So you are not looking at a particular thing, no object, because the object melts away if you are not paying to a particular attention to a particular object. Okay? If you pay attention to particular object, then what happens? The divisiveness arises. Arises means continues. It is already there. The divisiveness continues. Now you have to drop the divisiveness. Drop means what? You just see that the object is already included in consciousness. There is a consciousness in which the subject is already a part, object is already a part, but the consciousness, it is not conscious of something, it is consciousness. See the difference. Conscious of something, divisiveness. There is just consciousness. Of what? There is no thought of what. There is no thought of what you are conscious of. Because what you think, the thought of what is already included. The thought of what you are conscious of is included in consciousness. Therefore, there is just consciousness, which is all inclusive consciousness. The subject is included, object is included, time is included, world is included, state is included. Therefore, no movement. In subject-object relationship, there is a relativeness. There is a movement. You are striking a relationship. But in pure consciousness, you are not reaching. You are not trying. You are not reaching. You are not developing you are not striking a relationship. There is already one. Where is the need to strike a relationship? Consciousness included. Any thought already included. Another thought again included is already part of it. That means thoughts arise within the consciousness. They don't go away from consciousness. Any thought, any perception, any thought, everything is already part of consciousness. Neither it has gone out nor you have to bring it in. Okay? Thought has not gone out of consciousness. You don't have to bring it into consciousness. Thought, whatever it thinks, it is already part of consciousness. It is already part of consciousness. Consciousness is whole. It just is there. Already all thoughts are within consciousness. This is the way you understand. You break the division. Breaking means division is unnecessary. You don't make division. Instead of breaking, I use the word. You are not breaking the division. You are only dissolving the division. That means you don't make the division. That's all. You don't make the division, then you are already indivisible. Making division is subject-object. So you don't make division. That means you don't look at the object. The very looking at the object stops. Then the subject stops, object stops. There is one existence. the one consciousness. Okay? So the thought you are listening, the words you are listening, don't look for the meaning of the word. The word is already part of your consciousness. The sound you are hearing, is already part of consciousness. So you are not listening to the meaning of the word. You are only being the consciousness in which listening takes place. Okay, see the difference. You are not listening. Your listening is not meant for understanding. You are not listening to understand something. You are aware that listening is already part of consciousness. Okay, all your listening, the sound is already part of silence. The sound is arising from silence, is a part of silence. It already melts away into silence. Silence is uncreated. The silence is consciousness. Okay? The silence is uncreated. Nobody creates a silence. Silence has no beginning, no ending. A sound begins. You speak, you utter, sound begins. Then sound ends. When sound ends, what happens? Silence. When sound ends, silence. The silence doesn't begin with the ending of sound. See, the silence has been there. It has not begun with the end of the word, end of the sound. Okay? The silence has not begun by the ending of the sound. Even with the sound, silence is there. Without the sound, silence is there. Silence is in and through, before and after. It has been there because it is uncreated. Nobody created. Nobody can touch it. Nobody can destroy it. It is there. Its existence is self-existence. The silence is consciousness. Consciousness is there. Any thought is also consciousness. Thought ended, consciousness. No thought, again consciousness. So consciousness itself is continuously there. It includes all the thoughts. All the thoughts. Therefore, you are only aware of the consciousness in which all this sound is included. This listening, this sound. So the meaning of the teaching is not a particular concept. Okay? We are not giving you a concept. Don't look for concept. If you look for concept, you don't understand. You may get a concept, but not consciousness. Not the Brahmatman, not the Brahmajnanam. Okay? If you get the if you look for the thought, so the sound and the thought, word and the meaning, the sound and the meaning, you are again, you are continuing in this relativeness. Sound and its meaning, word and its meaning, sound and its thought. Okay? Sound and thought, word and meaning, this is again relativeness. If you live in this relativeness, you won't understand the truth. Okay? Word and its meaning, sound and its relation, sound and a thought. Don't divide the sound and thought. Generally, in all our process of life, even this thinking, even this listening of Vedanta, we say sound and a thought, word and the meaning. Word and the meaning is division. Sound and the thought is a division. But the silence is something. Silence includes the sound. Silence includes the thought. The silence itself neither begins nor ends. Whatever you thought arises, thought is within the silence. Silence is consciousness. Consciousness is natural, effortless. Because the very effort is part of consciousness. The will is part of consciousness. Consciousness is not a will. Silence is not a matter of will. You can't will the silence. Will is already part of silence. There is a silence in spite of will. In spite of the will, there is a silence. The will is within the silence. Silence neither begins. You can't will the silence. Silence is, naturally is. So that is consciousness. Indivisible consciousness. It doesn't divide into word and meaning. It doesn't divide into silence and word and a thought. Okay? Word and thought. Word and the meaning. Sound and the thought. So it doesn't divide. Sound is also silence. Thought is also silence. Silence is silence. Silence neither begins nor ends. It is just there. It is there not because you are thinking of it. The existence is not because of the thought. Thought is within the existence. Thought is existence, but existence is independent of thought. Consciousness is independent of thought. Thought is within consciousness, but consciousness is independent of thought. Okay, consciousness is independent of thought. Independent of thought means in spite of thought. Consciousness is independent of thought, in spite of the thought. Therefore, thought is already part of the, included in the consciousness. Consciousness itself is indivisible, whole, one, and natural. Natural. Self-existing. You can't handle it, you can't touch it, you can't begin it, you can't end it. You can't deal with it. It is there. It is just there. It is effortless and self-existing. Silence is, you can't think of a silence. Can you think of silence? By thinking, you are dividing the silence. You are dividing the silence into thought, okay, sound and thought. Silence means the thought is dissolved into it. In spite of the thought, there is a silence. Our silence is in and through the thought. In and through the silence is within the thought, outside the thought. Therefore, the silence swallows the thought. See, thought is swallowed by the silence. Thought is swallowed by the silence. Swallowed by the silence. Silence swallows everything, includes everything, exists itself. The silence is existence. Silence is consciousness. Okay? Silence is. It is consciousness. Not conscious of something. There is no conscious and of something. They are not two. They're just consciousness. Consciousness. It's not available for any dealings. It is just there. Okay? This understanding only Shastra or Guru can give us. Because Shastra and Guru should help you, should point out your attention to the silence, to the consciousness where the divisive gets melted away. The divisiveness gets melted away into the silence, into the self-existing consciousness. Okay. Therefore, you go to Guru, he says. Guru means again Guru Shishya division should not be a too big problem. The Guru Shishya should not be a division. If there is a right Guru, he will not allow the division. Okay? If you approach the right Guru, he doesn't allow the division. Because he is here to remove your division. Subject-object duality. He is here to remove the division, not to maintain the division. Therefore, Guru himself doesn't live in the divisiveness. Guru doesn't see the disciple as somebody other than his silence. Guru is not a person. He is that silence. And his disciple also included in the silence. He is the silence. In the silence, he includes his disciple. So in that silence, neither he stands as a Guru, nor he sees disciple as other than him. Other than that silence, other than the consciousness, other than the existence. He doesn't see disciple other than existence. Okay? He doesn't see anybody other than existence. There is nothing other than existence. And he doesn't stand as a person. Because his personality also melted into the existence. His individuality also becomes one with the existence, one with that silence. So these are different word I am using it. Whether you call it silence, whether you call it existence or being. Existence means just a being. Being of what? No question of what. It is just a being. All being. Whole being. It is just a being. It is just an existence. It is just a consciousness. Okay? So, Guru himself melt away his individuality. So he doesn't stand as a person. It doesn't stand as an individual. Therefore, when the Shishya comes, Shishya doesn't come from outside. He comes from his own silence, the silence which he is. Shishya is himself. See, for example, water. If the wave arises, where does the wave arise for the water? For the water, where does the wave come from? Wave comes from himself. Wave arises from the water. To the water, where does the wave come from? Wave is myself. Where does it come from? It is just myself. Wave doesn't come from outside because there is nothing outside. There is no such thing called outside. It is just myself. Even I can't use the word myself because it is just is. It is neither myself nor yourself, neither me nor you. Because you use any word, it means the same. Whether you call it me or whether you call it you. Any word means same thing. Words become irrelevant, meaningless. Whether you use I or use you. I means the same, you means the same. So the two words mean the same thing. The two words become meaningless. So whether you call Guru or Shishya, it means the same consciousness. So the Guru Shishya words become meaningless. Because there is no such thing which can be referred by word Guru. There is no such thing which can be referred by word disciple. There is only one consciousness. Any word you use, all the words merge into silence. Words don't reveal silence. When you use the word to reveal silence, words melt away into silence. Word doesn't reveal the silence. Words melt away into the silence. Melt away means they get included in the silence. Included, already included. Words get included in the silence. They are already melt away in the silence. Therefore, the subject is already in the consciousness. Shishya is already consciousness. So in that consciousness, neither Guru nor Shishya. That is the understanding of Guru. That is the understanding of the Shastra. If any new disciple comes, the purpose of teaching is to discourage your individuality. Melt away your individuality. Each sentence, each step, each sentence, each step helps the disciple to melt away his individuality. Don't assert your individuality. Don't retain your individuality. Don't assert because there is no threat for you. If you feel the threat, then you start asserting your individuality to protect yourself from the others. If you think there is other, then you remain as an individual. There is no such thing called other because there is no threat from other. There is no other, there is no threat. When there is no other, when there is no threat, you don't need to assert your individuality. Your individual also melts away. Individuality melts away because there is nothing other than in me and me. Me and other than me, two words don't make any difference. Two words are meaningless. Whether you call it me or other than me, both are my consciousness. My consciousness. So there is nothing. There is no division. Therefore, silence can't be divided. No sound can divide the silence because sound arises from the silence as it were. But sound doesn't break the silence. Sound that arises from silence, watch. Sound that arises from silence doesn't break the silence, doesn't cover up the silence, doesn't destroy the silence, doesn't go away from the silence. See, the sound that arises doesn't break the silence, doesn't cover up the silence, doesn't destroy the silence, doesn't go away from silence. Then what is sound? Sound also is silence. Silence is just natural. It is self-existence. It is no thought. Thought is sound. Thought is sound. Silence is, what to say? It swallows the thought. Silence swallows the thought. Consciousness swallows the thought. Consciousness is not thought. Thought is swallowed in the consciousness. Consciousness is one whole, indivisible, infinite. Consciousness is infinite and also self-existing. It is natural. It doesn't have to work. It doesn't have to think because the thinking is swallowed by consciousness. Doubt is swallowed by consciousness. The thought is swallowed by consciousness. Consciousness just is, naturally is. Okay, I think we'll stop for today. So, when you go to Guru, this is the way. This knowledge, then he praised the knowledge. Praising the knowledge is for the person who doesn't understand. It is only encouraging him to come to the knowledge. But the knowledge, as you directly listen, you understand the listening melts away, culminating into understanding. Understanding the consciousness, the very listening, the listener, the Guru, the world, all of them get included in the consciousness. Okay? In that one consciousness, nothing is away from it. Anyway, this point we'll discuss in the next class. Today I started late, but doesn't matter because there was some difficulty. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah. Harihi Om Tat Sat.